Hello everyone, this internet lesson is about the website Capzles. It is basically a timeline creator, but it has a nice interface, and students that I've used it with have really enjoyed kind of putting it together because you can make a lot of sort of fancy inroads with it. In the sense of what it does, it makes these interactive timelines that can include a whole bunch of different types of file formats. Images, documents, you can upload PowerPoints to it, Excel files, audio files, videos, and then again, as you scroll through these different things on the timeline, it's sort of just a really nice looking interface. Each item that you put on your timeline can be alone on it, they call that a moment, or you can put together a little stack that connects sort of a little group of things, and each of those things in the stack can have its own description. So that does give you some options in the sense of what you might use this for in the way of an assignment for students. And then capsules can be shared either via email or they can be embedded in a wiki or a website if that is your preference. But once students have completed them, they can easily share them with you by email address. Some possible uses all have to do with a timeline sort of approach, but certainly there are inroads for that in all subject areas. The one that probably occurs the most quickly is in social studies with a timeline of some kind of event or era that traces the life of a specific historical figure. But additionally, I think that timelines that detail how the understanding of something has changed, either be scientific, mathematical ideas, the approaches to different types of things in life. It could be a timeline that details an art era and how that sort of evolved, a timeline concerning the growth of a company or a specific type of social media and its effects on society in the way of some of those more business or sociology oriented classes. Could be a timeline that traces the events in a novel or story, or that kind of catalogs the reactions that a student has as a novel or story progresses. It could be a really interesting combination of both learning and reflection in that sense. And then additionally, you certainly could use this to make sort of a portfolio of sorts to either share with parents or that students then had as a record of their growth and learning in a class, because they can upload so many different types of things. You could eventually share these with parents, and that would be a great way to show what the class had been doing over the course of the time. If you're a high school teacher, perhaps you could put the accountability on the student of creating this timeline and uploading to it so that they had sort of a portfolio at the end. If you're an elementary teacher, you yourself could have an account here and then create a timeline sort of for the whole class and then share it with the parents in your class. You can make it to where these are private if the parents have an account as well, and so it would just be shared specifically with them, and so you can make this completely private. And then of course too, you could use it just to tell the story of a class project or field trip. Those of you who work at the high school level, perhaps a Spirit Week kind of thing to put on the school website or to share via Facebook if your high school has a Facebook page, so that parents are more aware and stakeholders in the community are more aware of all the great things that are happening in our schools. So here we are at the Capzles website, and I'm going to quickly do an overview of how creating a capsule works, but it is going to be pretty short because I do want you to take a little time in this lesson to just take a glance at some of these capsules and how they are organized and all the different kinds of things people have put in them, because there's a lot of great work that exists just on the site, and it will give you probably some ideas of how you could put yours in as well, rather than me telling you all about it. But I will show you just how things are put together here. And I will mention too, Capzles is interested in making a website that's specifically for teachers in schools. It looks like that probably will cost money when it's all said and done, but it is sort of an interesting thing that I've been following. I was hoping it might be available to us by this time that we were getting started here, but they're still sort of working on it. You can see that there's lots of different categories that Capzle uses, and a lot of people have made all sorts of different kinds of capsules. So it might be too that you find one on here already made that you find to be accurate and useful, and you could use this as something for students to take a look at in preparation for starting a new unit, or as an artifact that you could introduce to students so that they could learn about something else. So not only can they make them or you make them, but additionally you might find one on here that you could use as sort of a piece of classroom learning. So there's lots of different options here. I have found that students are pretty happy with this site and how it works. They do like how fancy you can make things, as I was saying. You can make accounts, or you can have students make accounts with their email addresses. I'll mention at this point too, I haven't mentioned it up to this point, but as with a lot of these that you have to have accounts for, there's a lot of what they call throwaway email creators where students could use it just to make an account, and then they go to that email creator. One of them is called Mailinator, for example. I'll put that in the extra resources of this lesson. They get to this inbox that they've randomly created, they confirm their account, and then they never need to use it again. And so that's an example of a way that students can get accounts even if they don't have an email address, or in that situation where they're under 13, then they have an account here, but it limits the amount of personal information that is accessible. And so that's one option that you could do. But if students make an account, for example, and then share one account, I had students do this. Each group made a timeline that was about a different but specific aspect of how the 1950s changed our culture and kind of some of the developments there. They worked together in one account, and it worked out pretty well. There were a few bugs every once in a while if they were working on it simultaneously, because this isn't necessarily meant for that, as Google Docs or something like that would be, but they can work within one account, and it seems to work fine. Every once in a while, if you're trying to add a lot of content at once, or you're trying to edit it quickly, this can get bogged down because the content can be such great sizes in terms of the megabytes this is trying to handle. But as I said, students have been pretty happy with it, and you can play with it a little bit and see if you think your students would be able to work with it with the different, computer capacities and whatnot that we have in the different schools. As I've been talking, I'm sure you've seen that all sorts of different capsules are showing up here in the little preview. These are just very popular ones. So again, once we're done here, I encourage you to take a look at some of these just to see what is out there and what people have used this for, to get an idea of how it works better. But we're already logged in, so if I go to create, and this is where your students will start also, I'm just going to make a new capsule. This is the interface where you put your capsule together, and it works really well. It's very intuitive. You can see that all your little options are over here on the side. We'll just talk about each one briefly so that you then have some time to explore. It tells us we're in design mode. Once the students have added all of their different things to it and they're ready to look at it, and they can go back and forth and kind of preview it and then edit some more by going to My Stuff, and then you see that My Capsules is here, and they just click on that, and when they see the capsule, they just click Edit. But once they click I'm finished, it's going to go to that interface that'll show it to them in sort of that fancier way. They first have to add a title and a description, and this is just simple. It changes this right here from untitled capsule to some kind of actual title. And then a brief description of what the whole thing is about would be added right here. They can choose to display the title or not. So if they don't want it to show up at all but only need a title to keep themselves organized, that's an option here. And then they can mess with the title to make it all sorts of pretty, and they can make it glow or do different things. So there's some options here to kind of make a fancy title. For example, when I used this in a class about the 1920s, the student's title had to reflect some sort of larger truth about what the 20s did in the sense of changing America and making it more of a modern society. So it was just kind of this quick snapshot of their understanding is what the title was meant to be. So you can have some options here in what you're requiring, or it could just be, my English 9 portfolio. So they add a title and description. The categories and tags are just more, again, organizational tools, but it is good for students to think about where their content belongs and what it's reflecting or representing. So I would recommend that they put it in a category, and then it will ask them to at least basically categorize it before they publish it. When they add content, this is really the meat of the whole thing. So they want to focus here for sure. And you can see that adding content has 3 options. They can upload directly onto the timeline, which is just that one moment for each piece that they upload. You can see it says that here. They can add a stack. So if they put in multiple files in a stack, it will just do one pile of things for people to look at that all have the same time assigned to them. Or they can actually blog directly on here, which if you click on this, you can just type an entry. And so certainly in the way of those timelines that might be more reflective or portfolio style, you could have students log on to this at the end of a class or at the end of a unit and just do a direct blog entry about kind of what they learned, what they liked about the unit or didn't, how they feel their performance is changing in the way of maybe writing or learning the different standards in the math or the foreign language that you're studying. All sorts of options here where they can just type a quick entry and it will just appear as a blog entry itself. So that's kind of a nice option for some different purposes. If they're making a timeline that is content-based, that has to do with your subject area, they'll more likely use these two. So if we just take a quick glance at this, when you click Add Files, it takes you to your choices. If you've watched the Animoto video, are some of the things that I used to show you how Animoto worked. So for example, if we just choose a few of these, we'll just draw a square around a few of them. So I've chosen these 4 pictures here, and we click Open. It's going to put them in our list of things that we want to upload. So you can see that this is what we have chosen so far, but it hasn't uploaded them yet. So you want to tell students they need to put the stuff in the one side, and these are all going to be different moments the way that I've chosen this. They need to put it over here, and then they need to choose this Start Upload option, which takes different amounts of time depending on what you have in the way of your files that you've added. If you have videos or pieces of music, lots of large files, it's going to take a little while for those things to be uploaded. So my uploading is all finished. I paused our video for about a minute or so to get these 4 pictures in. So again, it can take different amounts of time, but then you start to see the different things that you've put in. So if we click here, we can assign some information to this photo, and that's going to make it to where you can add these descriptions that I was talking about. Right now the description is just what the photo is, and the title is just that thing I saved it under when I found it online. So of course students want to make an accurate title that has the proper capitalization and whatnot. The description is the opportunity to maybe answer a question or to provide some information about that particular artifact or image that contributes to the actual content of the timeline. And then here's where they set the date and the time. They can change the date to be quite old. So this allows them to change, for example, if we change this to 1925, it will think about what January of 1925 was like, and we can choose a date, and it will change it. When I had students do this and the dates were only in the years, I just had them choose a random month, and that was fine. And you can decide what you want to do about that. It depends on how specific you want to be about the dates. They could also, of course, enter the year just in the title and then just put them in the proper order when they're saving them, and that would allow them to do it that way as well. And then you can just go from item to item here by using these top things. So they can upload a bunch of stuff at once and then wait for that to happen, and then go through and add new titles and descriptions based on what the assignment might be. They don't need most of this in the sense of what they're probably going to do with it, but if you do want some actual information about where you were at, if it was a field trip or something, you're able to add that as well. So here we are back at this add content, and again this stack option is just going to put them all in the same one. So with the title you want to say what it is altogether, that it's artifacts about, the Boston Tea Party, because you're doing a whole timeline of the revolution and you have 3 artifacts in this one. And so the stack title and description is not specific to each item, but rather the whole collection. And then once you've added files, you can do the same thing that we just saw to each one to be able to be more specific about what it is. So again, you can do individual items that are going to be specific moments, or you can do a little pile of items that are going to be about some event or something like that. So that does give you some nice options there. In the way of designing then the final pieces, you can add a specific background that you can choose. There's all sorts of different options here, or you can add photos of your own to do this. So students could find an image online or make an image in a photo editing piece of software to where they had their own made up background image. So that's an option there. And then additionally, you're able to add background music in the way of an MP3, or you can actually add several songs to kind of transition as you go along. So again, lots of options to sort of fancy this up and make it something that students are really proud of in the way of displaying either their own work or how they've traced a specific topic or event. Hopefully this gives you some ideas of some different things you could do with this. Again, I'd encourage you when you get on the Capzles website to just begin by looking at some of the ones that have already been created, since we just had time to give an overview of how you put stuff on a capsule. But I think this will give you a great idea of how it's done differently for different topics. So hopefully this has given you some ideas about how to use this particular tool and you enjoy looking around and getting even more.